In this video, we're going to learn top 5 most common mistakes that beginners make, especially beginners, but sometimes even intermediate to advanced modelers can make these mistakes. If you don't know what you're doing, these can be very frustrating. So let's get started. The first problem is trying to transform your objects, mesh objects, in object mode. And later, this can cause a lot of head scratching, a lot of problems, yeah? So let's do something. Let's scale this down in object mode, and let's go into edit mode and select this edge. Look, I just pressed number 2 in number row just to go to edge selection mode, 3 for face selection, 2, 1, I think you know this. And let's control B this edge to make a bevel. Now, if you look, it is not something that you expected. It's a strange behavior because this is just because you scaled your object in object mode. Okay, this is a problem. How do we solve this? It's very easy. In object mode, we press Ctrl A and apply scale. We can apply other transformations if you have done them in object mode. Let's go into edit mode now and select this edge and Ctrl B. Now it's working pretty it's working better, right? So now sometimes it can cause problems in for example rotation. Let's bring this object GX here and let's try to add mirror modifier. You expect that this modifier mirrors this object here, but it doesn't because you moved your object in object mode. If you did that in edit mode, it would this wouldn't happen. Go into edit mode. Oh, I'm sorry. Select everything, GX, and go out of edit mode. Add mirror. Now it's better. And also, it can cause problems when you rotate. Let's rotate this object like RX or RX90 and RZ90. And let's go into edit mode, select everything, GX. Let's bring it here. And now I will add a mirror modifier. Nothing happens. I expect it's trying to mirror it along x-axis, but it doesn't mirror because I rotated my object in object mode. To fix this, you press Ctrl A and apply rotation. So applying location, you should keep this in mind. Applying location will cause your object's origin to come to world center. Control A, no, location. If you saw, this brought your origin point to the center of the world. So right click and set origin to geometry. This is the first mistake that's very common and done by beginners. So the next problem is also very common, if not the most common. It's very common. It is having duplicate vertices, faces on top of each other. So this can be quite frustrating. Let's go into edit mode. Let's say I want to extrude this face, right? If you, for example, RX, rotate it and press right click, it goes back. Yeah, you cancel it. Now let's do this for extrusion. Let's press E to extrude. And oh, you suddenly realize that you are extruding the wrong side and you press right click. You think that it canceled, but actually not. It caused extra face here. It created extra face here. If you're not sure about that, you can click, select this face and G to move. As you can see, it extruded. How do you clean things like this? Sometimes there are multiple vertices on top of each other. Sometimes faces, sometimes even edges can be multiplied and can be sitting on top of each other. So it can have some problems. For example, let's add subdivision surface modifier. And suddenly you realize that there is a problem here. Why is this happening? Why? So let's apply subdivision surface to another cube, and here it's much better, but this thing is kind of strange. This is because of that extra face. So you can go into edit mode, select everything, press M, and choose by distance. This operation does merging. This merge some vertices by the distance to each other. If they are very close to each other, you can change the margin distance here. If you increase this number even more, increasing this number can cause problems sometimes. It will merge even more vertices to each other. If for example you select 2 centimeters, if there are two vertices 2 centimeters from each other, they will get merged. So it can be problematic. So this is what will happen if you have multiple vertices and faces on top of each other. It can cause a lot more problems than only when applying something to the surface. It will be very difficult to unwrap. It can cause problems in shading, and many other things can be problematic in rigging and other stuff. So please clean up your meshes by going inside and pressing M and selecting by distance. And you can see, if I just do this, extrude and select everything, press M by distance, and here you can see remove 2 vertices. And now your object is a bit cleaner. So yeah, this is another thing that you should keep in mind. And sometimes, for example, you can select this face and you want to separate it. You can do this. You press this and click Y. And now it's separated. This face is a separate face. And it also means there are 2 vertices here, not 1 vertex. There are 2 vertices here, as you can see. And if you really need this face to be a separate face, you can't just merge them, because if you merge by distance, it will clean those 4 vertices and make this face joined with the rest of the mesh. So yeah, sometimes you must be careful in these kinds of situations, but more often than not, it is very useful to clean up your meshes, and this can cause a lot of problems if you don't. So the next very common problem is has a name which is called flip normals. To understand this, you need to understand something called normals. And a normal is one side of the face. Look at this plane, for example. It's just one face, but this face has 2 sides, the front side and back side, or front face, back face, I don't know, normal side and opposite normal direction, opposite normal, blue, red, whatever you call it, it has 2 sides. It is not just one face, it has 2 faces. So how do we know that? A very easy way to visualize this, you can come here to shading, and let's use this face orientation option, not this back face culling. The face orientation is even more obvious. If you turn this on, you can see everything is blue, but if you go down and look at this face, it is red. And if you go inside this cube, everything is red, because this cube also has faces with 2 faces, right? 2 directions. Sometimes it can, sometimes you might have wrong direction in your face, on your face, not your face, the mesh's face, and it can cause problems. Let's see what kind of problems it might cause. Let's go inside and go inside this and maybe select this face, and you can actually flip the normal, you can actually flip the faces, but you don't do it usually intentionally, you do it by accident when you're modeling. Now I will do it intentionally just to demonstrate what happens. So let's demonstrate it with a UV sphere, GX. Come here and let's select these faces, for example, and flip them. If you want to flip, you can come to face and mesh, normals, and flip. Nothing is visible, but if you turn this face orientation on, you can see it. So now, what kind of problem it might cause? It can cause problems in many situations. Let me give you some examples. For example, in smooth shading. Have you ever had this kind of strange shading artifact? If you flat shade it, everything's fine. But if you smooth shade, there is a really horrible, strange shading artifact, right? This is just because of those flip normals. You can go inside. How do we fix it? You can go inside. You can manually select those faces and flip them. Or if you do this automatically, you select everything and press Shift N, and it will try to calculate. Sometimes, most times, it will give you a good result, but sometimes, if it doesn't give you the desired result, you can do it manually. You can see all these different options here for normals. So another problem, let's flip this. Let's Alt N is a normal menu, flip it, and give subdivision surface modifier. Subdivision surface, try to multiply the level, and you see that's a horrible thing. It's just because of this flip normal. You can go inside, select everything, Shift N, and everything is fixed. So another problem which can happen with flip normals, we can subdivide this and flip this, Alt N and flip. Now let's give it some hair particles, and you can see the hair is growing to the opposite direction here. So just because of it can have a lot of other problems. It can cause many other problems, flip normal. So you should be aware of that too. So the next mistake is kind of more abstract and not very easy to fix, not by any shortcuts. The next mistake that many beginners make is not to follow some topology rules. For example, there are two notions or concepts, good topology and bad topology. Let me demonstrate this. So let's let's Shift D and duplicate this. Now go into edit mode, subdivide, right click and subdivide. So sometimes you do this intentionally, sometimes not. Sometimes you do it by accident. For example, let's do this intentionally just for the sake of demonstration. Now in object mode, you can see the faces are quite identical. They are not there isn't any difference. But if you look at the wireframe of these two, you really see the wrong topology. I just did it intentionally, which is not very clever thing to do, but sometimes you do it by accident, and it can also cause problems. Even worse is when you have some intersections like these, and it can cause shading issues and a lot of problems, as you can see. So you should be very careful with the way that edge flow. And another thing is, actually, to make this face, you don't need this many vertices. You can just get rid of some of these edges if you really don't need them, because the golden rule is to have as few polygons, as few vertices as possible when you're modeling. It's not only because of computing power, because these days computers are really powerful and can handle many polygons and vertices very easily. It's just because when you're modeling, you don't want to have problems, headaches. The more vertices, the more polygons you have, the harder it is to control, to kind of deal with them, deal with the problem. So whatever you make, whatever you model, try to make them with few vertices, few polygons as possible. Another golden rule when it comes to topology is to model with quads. Quads means rectangles or squares, faces with 4 sides. So the next mistake is not a very serious mistake, but it's very easy to make and also very easy to fix. So it is adding mesh objects in edit mode. Let's go to edit mode and as X Let's try to make a horse carriage or something. Now it's the main part, and let's bring in a cylinder for the wheel, RX 90. And let's give it a mirror modifier, but when you go out of object mode and give mirror, let's choose Y, you have this, but it's all of them are one object. And even worse than this is that we have actually multiplied the vertices here, GY, as you can see. We don't need to do this, right? So, and how do we separate this object from the rest of the mesh? We can select this and P and selection. P is for separation. Now they are their own objects. But still, we have a problem here. We should just remove this mirror. But better than this, you just, when you are making something, for example, before you add another mesh, which must be a separate object, go out of edit mode and then add the cylinder, okay? And then it will be a separate object. This happens so often, so I just decided to include this mistake too.